This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Let's get right into it. Protests and curfews tonight in major cities across the U.S. as demonstrations against police violence continue for a seventh night. It's been a dark cycle as hundreds of thousands of people have protested, pushing back on the use of force from police and police responding with more use of force. Nothing's ever really shocking anymore, but the president's response to protests is unlike anything seen from the White House in modern history. During a call with governors today, President Trump said this about the protests.
You have to dominate. If you don't dominate, you're wasting your time. They're going to run over you. It's going to look like a bunch of jerks. You have to arrest people and you have to try people. And they have to go to jail for long periods of time. These are terrorists.
Meanwhile, with protesters just outside its gates, the White House has gone dark. Not every protest across the country has turned violent, but in New York City, DC, Minneapolis, Dallas, and many other cities, demonstrations have given way to attacks on both people and property, with businesses looted and storefronts destroyed. In several cases, protest organizers have tried to stop that destruction and keep the focus on the violence from police that started these demonstrations. It's easy to feel like the world is on fire right now, and in some parts of the country, it is, or has been over the last couple of days, which is why in times like these, looking back at history might bring some deeper understanding. In 1968, things were also pretty hectic. Anti-war and anti-racism demonstrations popped up all over the country. Some of those demonstrations became riots, like when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. Before and after King's assassination, there was plenty of discussion about whether demonstrations had gone too far. King himself criticized the riots, but he also gave us some language to help understand what was going on. There's a line from his 1967 speech at Stanford that feels timely. King said, "A riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? If you listen to demonstrators today, they'll let you know."
We're asking for change. We would like prison reform. We would like the end of police brutality. We need them to step up when it comes to racism.
I'm here to unite our city behind this common theme of that we deserve justice, not just for what happened to Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, but what's happening to black men and women all across this country, and that's been happening.
That's Will Calloway, a social justice activist who helped make sure we saw the video of Laquan McDonald, a black man being killed by police in Chicago in 2014. Demonstrations are always going to be polarizing and disruptive, which is the point. Today, those civil rights protests of the late 1960s are looked back on as an important step toward justice. But when they happened, they were really divisive and pretty unpopular. Times change, and sometimes they change because of protests. But let's remember why we're talking about all of this in the first place. Low-key, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a second to talk about a man whose death precipitated a lot of what we're seeing right now. George Floyd was more than just the latest name in the grimmest version of Mad Libs that starts with "Justice for blank." Floyd was born in North Carolina and grew up in Houston. He played basketball at South Florida State College in Avon, Florida. At one point, he linked with DJ Screw, a popular Houston DJ who created the chopped and screwed technique of remixing tracks and slowing them to an almost glacial pace. This is him on the track.
Boys rolling butter, some coming white. It's that big Floyd throwing tray in the night.
Floyd was a father, a brother, and a son. He died on Memorial Day at the age of 46 after being choked by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Some demonstrators over the past week have peacefully protested the death of George Floyd and violence against black people. Others have taken advantage of the opportunity to really ratchet things up and incite even more anger and violence. Newsy's Kat Sandoval has this story on how Black Lives Matter organizers are taking a stand against violent agitators who are distracting from their message.
Stop! Stop! This is not what we wanted! Stop!
This is not what we wanted, yells protester and Denver School Board Director Tay Anderson. During the George Floyd protests, the white vandal is reprimanded.
We weren't here for that. We explicitly told people as we were walking, before we were walking, that we were not here to destroy property. We were not here to agitate. We were here to show up peacefully, and it was disgusting.
Anderson's experience isn't unique.
This is not a black woman who's putting Black Lives Matter. Y'all doing that for us, and we ain't asked you to do that. Listen, Don't spray stuff on here when they gonna blame black people for this, and black people didn't do it.
In Washington, D.C., one white rioter is destroying city property until protesters delivered him to the police. In New York City, of the nearly 800 people arrested, 1 in 7 are not from New York City. New York officials and others around the country think outside agitators are hijacking the protest. And in Chicago, images of looting threaten to drown the voices calling for change.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's awful. This is our home. And these people who've come in to try to disrupt that, the organized elements who care not about systemic issues, but shoes for profit.
Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx says we shouldn't use the terms protesters and looters interchangeably.
We conflate protesters and looters. Those are two different groups. Let us not conflate what is happening in our streets across the country.
The George Floyd and Black Lives Matter protest is about justice for George Floyd and an end to police brutality. Denver community activist Tay Anderson and others fear that message is lost in the wave of destruction, looting, and property damage.
Some people are coming out with their own motives, and they're using the pain of our community to being able to use that as an excuse to destroy their cities. Now, in other cities, there are people of color that are rightfully angry, that are taking to the streets in their own way.
Anderson tells Newsy that he doesn't speak on behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement, but as a Black community organizer, he says he doesn't judge other people of color who are angry and destroying property.
And I don't critique people of color because we are an oppressed people. We have been oppressed, and so we have seen, we are done dying. And I understand other organizers and other brothers and sisters in the fight, but it is not the space for white folks to come in on our behalf and to destroy property in our name if we didn't ask for them to do so.
Kat Sandoval, Newsy, Chicago.
Turns out these protests could have a big impact on the other big story of 2020. We're breaking it down next.
The number of African migrants arriving at Mexico's southern border has soared. Immigration officials tag African migrants entering Mexico as apatrida, or stateless.
Getting caught up on the news needs to work with your schedule, and Newsy has you covered. Download our streaming app for Roku and Amazon Fire TV to get up to speed with the biggest stories of the day. Newsy, be informed, not influenced.
After months of social distancing, if you're looking at these protests wondering what it means that so many people are so close together, you're not alone. Knowing the risks of just about any activity outside the home is important right now, and that goes for protests too. Newsy's Lindsay Thies has the story.
Governors and mayors are warning that large protests can spread the coronavirus and cause a second surge of COVID-19 cases, just as many cities were beginning to open back up.
You have a right to demonstrate, you have a right to protest, God bless America. You don't have a right to infect other people. You don't have a right to act in a way that's going to jeopardize public health.
If you were out protesting last night, you probably need to go get a COVID test this week, because there's still a pandemic in America that's killing Black and brown people at higher numbers.
Can't breathe. I can't breathe. Nicole Harris has an autoimmune disorder and is high risk for contracting COVID-19, but that hasn't stopped her from attending 2 protests in Denver.
This is like a really emotional, heavy thing for me, that I feel like it's really important for people to go out there, even in a pandemic, and say that this isn't okay.
COVID-19 mainly spreads through close contact by large respiratory droplets, which happens when someone sneezes, coughs, shouts, or yells. As protests continue, the World Health Organization shared new guidance on holding mass gatherings during a pandemic, while local health departments are sharing tips on Twitter.
We know just from demographics that it's disproportionately hit certain aspects of our population harder than others. The other piece of it that I have concerns about is that, we've seen that a lot of the people coming into these protests are coming in from other areas. They come in from other cities or maybe other communities, and then they'll be exposed in that one gigantic area. If they are exposed, they'll bring it back to their community, their hometown. So even if their hometown has little to no spread of this, they may become a hotspot all of a sudden.
ER physician Eric Hill says he hasn't seen a surge in protesters coming in sick, but he expects it.
The incubation period can be up to 10 to 14 days. And even if they do contract it around that time period, for them to become symptomatic enough to necessarily present to an ER, might be another week after that too. So I would not expect to see a spike in volume related to this for probably 3 to 4 weeks.
As for protesters, they don't plan to stop demonstrating anytime soon. Nicole Harris says she plans to attend one tonight. She also plans to get tested for COVID-19.
There is a very real possibility that I could get sick. And I hope that if I got sick that I would beat getting COVID. And people are dying every day because of the police violence.
The police is the biggest virus right now, so we have to pick and choose our battles. So yeah, we're socially distant, we're trying to stay 6 feet apart, but we're just trying to get the message out. That's the most important thing.
Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
Next up, we're bringing you the info on the disinfo around these protests. Excited that you found Newsy's clear, straightforward news reporting? Just remember, you can come back every morning for fresh, up-to-date stories and get your day started with news that matters most to you. On your schedule, anytime you need us, every day. All facts, no opinion. We're Newsy. Be informed, not influenced. There's a lot to sort through online right now, and unsurprisingly, governments are taking advantage of the social media chaos around these protests. Tyler Atkinson fills us in.
Experts and officials are concerned that the U.S. could be, once again, falling victim to foreign actors encouraging division on social media. Over the weekend, Republican Senator Marco Rubio, the acting chair for the Intelligence Committee, tweeted that he'd seen heavy social media activity on protests and counter-reactions from social media accounts linked to at least 3 foreign adversaries.
I've seen a number of tweets from the Chinese today that are taking some sort of pleasure and solace in what they're seeing here.
These accusations have some credibility.
We have seen from April of last year to now over a 300% increase in Chinese diplomats and Chinese embassies who now have Twitter accounts.
Brett Schaefer tracks social media behavior from countries like China and Russia. He says Chinese diplomats and embassies are increasingly adopting Western social media platforms to launch attacks toward the U.S. For example, Chinese operatives reportedly used Facebook and Twitter to amplify certain disinformation about COVID-19 lockdown policies as they became more heated and partisan.
I think they're probably looking for an endgame similar to what I think we look for from Russia when they engage in conspiracy theories. It's to throw enough competing narratives out into the information space that it becomes difficult for the average information consumer to decide what's true and what's not.
Additionally, experts say it's too early to attribute specific disinformation about the protests to individual countries. It's also too early to know how much of an impact those messages may have had. And in many cases, most posts aren't about spreading disinformation, but rather amplifying unfavorable information. On Sunday, an account with just 3 followers managed to make DC blackout trend on Twitter, amassing roughly 500,000 tweets in the first 9 hours after being posted. Tyler Atkinson, Newsy, Chicago.
We're going to give you a quick moment to refill your own mug. When we're back, we're going to take a step back from the headlines and bring some much-needed levity and, honestly, some weirdness to your night.
As coronavirus spreads across the country, you might be looking for ways to make sense of it all. Newsy's here to help with some deeper context, explaining and reporting on the pandemic. Virology, only on Newsy. Be informed, not influenced.
Sure. Memes and cat videos are fun, but actual news might be a bit more useful. Follow Newsy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get straightforward, opinion-free news right on your social news feed.
Making it in the entertainment business is tough enough without a global pandemic to deal with. In the age of coronavirus, up-and-coming actors, comedians, and musicians are still hustling, but not for the studio, for social media. Newsy's virology series has been breaking down the pandemic since day one, and for this one, our own Cody LeGros breaks down the weird world of coronavirus content stars.
Lights, camera, and literally no action anywhere. As COVID-19 puts a halt on the entertainment industry, social media is the only stage that's open. Social distance is creating a unique climate for content creation and consumption. From emerging social media challenges to the more exotic binge opportunities.
A zookeeper went to prison for murder for hire.
If it's released during the pandemic, it has the potential to reach a more captive or quarantined audience. A Newsy Ipsos survey reveals more than half of Gen Z and millennials are scrolling through social media more now than usual. And about a third of them are more likely to post something. And for Gen Z especially, TikTok and Snapchat use are way up. That means more eyes on more content and the potential for more growth in a stalled entertainment industry.
I had 2,000 followers on Twitter, and now I have over 20,000.
This is Addie. She's an actress and comedian living in LA, better known as the lady with the light-up nunchucks. She was one of the first people to explode in quarantine, and going viral right now is a way for her to avoid going broke.
I had auditions for projects that went from being in-person auditions to self-tapes to they're pushing the production months anyways.
Yeah.
Pilots that were supposed to go, writers' rooms that were supposed to happen, everything that isn't guaranteed, but is pretty much what's going to happen is all up in the air, and It makes already a very confusing industry even more confusing to navigate.
You're feeling the effect of who will be crowned America's next top coronavirus content creator?
A little bit, and I'm trying not to because there's already oh my god Cody, there's already such a pressure for comedians especially to make content, make characters, make tweets, do all of this free work. But what people really want is for you to go viral, and if you go viral then it's so dependent on just who retweets and the humor of one person with a lot of followers, and it's just how stuff catches or not catches.
Okay, I'm bored in the house and I'm in the house bored. Bored in the house and I'm in the house bored.
Curtis Roach is an up-and-coming hip-hop artist in Detroit. He posted this video on TikTok, and then so did everyone, including rapper Tyga.
Okay, I'm bored in the house and I'm in the house bored. Bored in the house and I'm in the house bored.
Once Tyga did it, I think, that's when they started going crazy.
Millions watched and posted their own version of boredom, all while Curtis launched his career. And working from home for him means shooting his first major music video.
Hey, I'm in the crib like an infant with some Badu playing burning incense. Badu, tonic, gin mixed in. Snoop house shoes getting down in the kitchen. Hey.
To recap, Curtis Roach turned a viral TikTok into a hit song with a huge record label alongside a major name in music, while you sat at home in sweatpants.
I have a song with Tyga. This is unreal. Once I sent the verse over, he was losing it. He was like, yo! He was just going crazy. So, honestly, I'm glad that, that relationship is being built. He's been very cool about it.
That makes you just 1 degree of separation away from being the next Kardashian, baby. That's you.
Hey, I'm thankful. Kylie Jenner put it as her caption.
So as we keep up with the content, big names and big brands are also relying on social media to maintain their audience. Perhaps this pandemic phenomenon is best described by the hashtag #StayAtHomecoming movement. Netflix employee Jasmine Lawson tweeted the idea that people should stream Beyoncé's Homecoming together using the same hashtag. Support first came from the fans, then the brands, and then the Queen herself. For the record, Beyoncé has tweeted 17 times since 2012, and before this, she has never retweeted anyone. Rightfully so, Jasmine freaked. But so did an industry. In a day, one tweet became a top trend, brand-backed campaign that triggered mainstream media coverage because it was endorsed by one of the most elusive entertainers alive. This halt in traditional entertainment highlights how viewers and creators are coping together and answering if this is the new normal for an industry that's been shifting to digital platforms for years. Can a virtual audience replace a physical one? Will studios release straight to streaming? What does a big break even look like?
I was talking to a friend and it was like, everyone's going to be doing videos next week. Like, it doesn't matter how famous you are. John Hamm is going to be like making videos. Like, Kristen Bell is going to be making content.
You've got questions? What exactly is coronavirus? Let's get some answers.
Join host Kristen Bell for Kids Together, the Nickelodeon Town Hall.
Right now, social media offers the brightest spotlight for those missing their audience, especially for already famous faces and their fans.
Thanks for sticking around. We're going to clock out, but feel free to meet us back here tomorrow, same time, same place. But don't bounce just yet. More top stories from Newsy are headed your way.